Should we go ahead and get started? I can't hear you. Are you?
Fine.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is the second public forum on homelessness. I'm Aaliyah Tantarelli. I work with the Department of Health Services. This is an informal meeting, so we'll have a short presentation around lived experience at the beginning, and then we'll open it up for question and answer period. We won't be using the timer like we do in other meetings, but we ask that you please keep your question or comments to 3 minutes so that everybody who wants to has a chance to engage. And I'll let you know when you reach that time, but we won't have the clock up like we do in the board meetings. And let's see, what else? Housekeeping. When it's your turn to speak during that time, I'll unmute you, but you also need to unmute yourself. And if you're calling in, you'll need to press *9 to raise your hand to be unmuted. And I think that's it for me on housekeeping. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Michael to do some introductions.
All right, it's Leah. Thanks again for everybody for joining this evening again. It's great to have folks joining these webinars. So I guess tonight, just by way of introduction, I'm Michael Gauzen, Homelessness Manager with the Department of Health Services, Homelessness Services Division. And our topic tonight is really focusing in on the value of lived experience of homelessness in leadership, decision-making, public input, really the whole gamut around homeless services. And by lived experience, I mean having experienced homelessness at some point in your life, and then either moving into housing or maybe continuing to have lived experience of homelessness. And we're fortunate to have two of our great leaders here today, Rebekah Sammet, who's the chair of our Lived Experience Advisory Board, which is our first formal board of individuals with lived experience who formally advise our continuum of care. And Chessy Etheridge, who's also a member, has been a member of that and is also a member of our Continuum of Care Leadership Board. So I'm just going to turn it over to Chessy and Rebekah to share a bit, and then we'll be here to jump in and answer questions as well. So Chessy, Rebekah, I don't know which of y'all would like to jump off first, but go right ahead.
Sure, I can kick us off.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so as Michael mentioned, my name is Rebekah. I was homeless for a long time in Sonoma County, and I just became passionate about our programs in Sonoma County from living through it and going through so many different programs. And back when I first started, there was not a lived experience advisory board. However, that was when about 2017, the continuum of care was going through some changes and started bringing in more lived experience. So I first started on a bigger advisory board, and I was quickly nominated to be on the old CoC, which was called Home Sonoma County. And from then until now, I can say that Sonoma County has made a lot of changes and the programs have greatly improved. So I stick with it because I continue to see lived experience voices influencing change and policy more and more in Sonoma County. And I'm glad to be here. Thanks for hosting this.
And my name is Chessy, and this is my second term on the CoC. And I had, during COVID, a short period of homelessness in which I thought it was a domestic violence. I thought that I would be able to rehouse myself really fast. Didn't see I was smart, be able to get resources, had a car, and found really fast how hard it is to navigate through the system. And I became very passionate after becoming housed again, being an advocate and a voice through lived experience, through the LEAP board, which I'm co-chair on, and the CoC. And it has been, it's been amazing to just see the knowing firsthand that the challenges that we face and the barriers, and seeing that there's solutions to those. Thank you.
Before I open it up to questions, excuse me. I was wondering if maybe each of you could talk maybe about some of the barriers, folks face, with lived experience and providing, not only input, but all to decision making, but having voices heard.
Barriers to housing or barriers to getting our voices heard? So I heard kind of two parts to that.
Both of them. Yeah. I think both of those would be great to answer.
So some of the barriers getting into shelters are the capacity, also the demographics. Some you have to have children to get into the quote unquote good shelters. And having pets can be a big barrier. People, need to have their animals, and shelters, I think only one in Sonoma County accepts pets. And as far as getting our voices heard, I think one of the biggest barriers is when you're still experiencing homelessness, getting your head wrapped around outside of survival mode is a big problem. I think it's hard. I mean, you have to focus on, your day-to-day survival. And I've heard that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So I think that can be a communication gap. We want to hear from people more, and sometimes it's hard to get clear, not clear answers, but it can be difficult to participate because the meetings that we have are generally focused more long term. And when people are looking at short term, immediate emergency solutions, and we're in meetings talking about how we're going to, put something together, it can be really frustrating, that this is pressing for people. And in meetings, it doesn't always come as that it's pressing and needs to happen now.
And also some barriers that I see is like just on an average day, the time it takes just to when you're unhoused to be able to get yourself ready for society, so to speak. If you're in a car in safe parking and you have an animal, like just getting to a rental, getting to a rental and presenting yourself, with an animal in your car. I mean, just that is a barrier. If you're Spanish, if you're have a language other than English, that can be a barrier. If you're elder and don't have, internet, you're not internet savvy, that's a huge barrier. You don't have an address, charging your phone, having a charging station or something. A phone is like pivotal, and it's very hard to find anywhere to charge your phone. And yeah, there's lots. It sounds like there's so much out there for a homeless, there's these programs, all this money thrown, why are people not getting housed? And when you talk to the individuals, I do outreach as well, they don't see that. You think that they're offered, and a lot of times they're not. And it's, a dynamic system that's changing and addressing those needs. And we're able to bring awareness to those gaps in the system.
Thank you. I'm going to throw one more question at y'all, then we'll open it up for discussion. And this one's one I get asked a lot. And as someone who's, my name is out there a lot in terms of folks can reach out for help or resources. So I'm often asked by folks who maybe aren't in this field and don't quite, know the ins and outs of, what it means to be homeless or experience homelessness. And that's like, as Joe citizen, right? What could I do to help? Right? What is one thing I could do to help?
To help people who are homeless now?
Yeah.
Well, number one, we just need more housing and more emergency shelters. So private properties that have large amounts of property where people can go and have safe parking. That's a big one. Also finding nonprofits that have that capacity and donating to the nonprofits. They don't always get the funding that they're asking for. Sometimes there's not enough funding to cover a project. So looking for projects that are, ready to deploy, and outreaching to people or contacting a outreach agency to see how they can be supported. I'm sure Chessy has more, but we need land and housing.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit everything that I was going to say. Just to add on to that, I think just educating yourself and others about, homelessness, and just bringing yourself to, stop and say hello to somebody who's homeless, make contact with them. That's one of the big stigmas, is people don't feel, our unhoused don't feel human, when they're just walking. We can walk by people laying down in the sidewalk these days and not even, stop our conversation that we're having. Maybe we need to just stop and be aware again, and educate ourselves. Compassion.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more, I promise, then we'll turn it over. Just because y'all are sparking a lot of ideas in my head. It maybe, when both of you were experiencing homelessness, or, going through that, what was the thing that helped y'all the most, right? In terms of, whether it was something you did or someone else did.
So one of the biggest helps was going to the living room, because they had it was at a church back then, and they had a computer, a phone we could use, there was food, and it just felt like a really safe space for us to go. Also, there was a program I went to called Rent Right, and I'm not sure if Catholic Charities still does it, but Rent Right taught me how to, when I was looking for housing, that they taught me how to look up the address through the assessor's office, so I can make sure that it wasn't a scam, so that the owner or the person renting it was actually the person who was renting it. And they also helped pay for some things off my credit report that helped me get a better credit score so I could rent on my own. And transitional housing. Transitional housing was the last stepping stone before I was able to get into my own housing, and that was through CoCs. And I had a room for rent all to myself and my kids, and we were able to have stay there as long as we needed, and I stayed there for about a year. Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, it was people that I looked up to and that believed in me when I wasn't believing in myself, and was ready to give up, thinking I wouldn't successfully get housed again. And that was huge, just having that person to call and have a soft place to land, like kind of like the saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that really went a long way for me.
Awesome. Okay, well, before I guess we go to live questions, we do have a question from Adrian at Saves, and I'll just put this out there to y'all both. And Adrian's question is, sorry if I'm pulling this up, I'm reading it. Do you think all homeless people should have a place where they can set up a tent or park when they first become homeless?
Yes. I have developed an idea. I haven't spread very far, but we should have a designated campground where people can go if they can't get into a shelter. There should be a campground that they can go to and pitch a tent or pull up an RV or a safe park. And even more so, if it doesn't have to be the whole campground. Let's say if it was only half, then families can still go, they can pay to be there, and whoever drives in has the dignity that you don't know if they're just going camping or if they're there on an emergency emergency basis, and it can, with all the funding details and everything. But absolutely, no one should literally have nowhere to go.
And I agree, absolutely. Especially right into homelessness, it's so terrifying. And just that basic, it's just basic. It's basic human rights to have somewhere safe to sleep, even if it is unhoused, and warmth. Yes.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, so we can open it up now to any attendees.
Yep. So if you'd like to ask a question or a comment, go ahead and raise your virtual hand and I will unmute you. And if you're calling in, press *9 to raise your virtual hand, and then I'll mute you after that. We do have a hand. And as a reminder, we're asking people to keep their questions or comments to 3 minutes. I will be tracking that, but not formally. I'll let you know when you reach the 3-minute mark. Davis Bernstein, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think Rebekah made the comment about just engaging with someone who's on the street homeless, or maybe Chessy, to acknowledge them. But how would you open up that conversation? I mean, would you just say, would you like to chat for a little bit, or how would you best do that?
Maybe just say hi. Just pause enough to just say hi and just acknowledge them. I think that's huge. And then from there, depending on the person, it opens it up to conversation. But just looking at somebody in their eyes, I think, is huge.
I think what's hard about that is when you see someone who may need more help than you can give, then we may not want to engage with them because we can't fix everything. So what I've done is just ask someone if they're, too cold or too hot. And, and I've brought people into my car and blasted the heater on them, or, the AC, offering water. And sometimes it really is just about acknowledging, that they're there and they're a neighbor of ours. I just tell my kids, these are our neighbors. Some of them have houses, some of them don't. Yeah.
Is it appropriate to just, I usually like to have $5 bills around that I could hand someone at the corner. I mean, is that an insult, or is that if I said to somebody, can you use this, or I hope you can use this? Is that?
I think it just depends on the person.
Okay. Just have to play it through.
Just ask them how they're doing, say, hey, how are you? Just like you would anybody else, and don't assume that they're homeless. Maybe they're just having a hard day. So.
Thank you.
Davis, was that
also offering services, if you can have any resources in your pocket, if you can, have the host team or the IMDT team or other resources around the county, and say, hey, if you need a place to stay, call this number. Coordinated entry is another one. Just maybe get familiar, as Chessy said, just educate yourself about the resources we do have and try to offer that to people as well.
And you could always buy portable charging packs for cell phones and hand those out instead. That would be huge.
Huh. Thank you.
Thank
Was
you,
that your
David.
question in the chat as well, in the Q&A? Or was that a different one? It was a similar question, just asking.
You me? Oh, that was my question I put in the chat.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, just wanted to be sure we're covering everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? And they could be directed at Chessy or Rebekah, or they could be about anything. Oh, Dennis Posake.
You are CoC Board Chair.
You are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wondered if either of you was comfortable speaking sort of a little more detailed about your path when you first became homeless? In other words, I'm not asking for you to name the shelter you went to or the rapid rehousing person you spoke to, but where did you first go, and who advised you to go there, or how did you make that decision? And then what happened there? Were you just told there was nothing that could be done, or were you offered some help in some way, and either they referred you to somewhere or you went somewhere else on your own? Just looking for a little more about how your early path was, if you're willing.
I'm comfortable. Our home was sold and we had to move. My mom didn't do anything wrong. We always paid our rent, and we burned through all of her money going to hotels until we ended up at a family shelter. And then we timed out of the family shelter and we had to sleep in our car. And then our car got towed and we went to other shelters. We just kept timing out of shelters until we finally got a lottery pick for one of the newly built subsidized apartments. And that was how my mom really, got her stability going. And then as I got older, I became homeless as an adult, and the programs were a lot different. So I did go through coordinated entry and was in a family shelter, and then I went straight into a transitional house. So the process from 1999 to 2000, 2015 or so was completely different. But I had known about all the resources because of going through all them with my mom. So as an adult, I kind of just knew where I would qualify.
Thanks.
And my homelessness was during COVID. So at first I tried every resource I could myself, like everything I could possibly find on computer research, and it never really led anywhere until I got plugged into coordinated entry. And once I got into coordinated entry, I was able to have an outreach, an IMDT worker come meet me where I was at, and get me in the system. And then I went to what was called an NCS, which was a non-congregational site. And then once I was plugged with a case manager, it was a whole different story. It was still extraordinarily hard with all the barriers and, the no voucher, etc. And it took about a year for me to finally get housed. But I don't think that I don't think that I would have gotten housed within the year just because of the lack of housing, etc. if it hadn't been for my case manager to be able to. I got an emergency voucher and got housed that way. But it was, when I was on my own before coordinated entry, it was extremely hard. I mean, a lot of promising roads that led nowhere and didn't get me back on the road. So that was my.
Well, thank you. That helps me. I in some work that I've done with Haitian and Central American refugees as a junior social worker, if you will, and it seems that so much in terms of the toxic stress that's experienced by a homeless person relates to, some of these folks just immediately find a place to live, and it's just so much less stressful than the person who has that as their main concern for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
Next, we have Lynn Luther. Lynn, you're unmuted.
Unmute. There we go. Okay. Yes. When I was first coming into
You sound a little distant. Are you able to speak up a little bit?
Santa Rosa and Sonoma County, I was living in my car, and my sister down in Barstow wouldn't let me stay with her for more than a week. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back up to where I was before. And one of the things that helped me the most is finding out information, resources, and the Sonoma County Homeless Resource Guide that I found at the Sonoma County Housing Office, where I was going in to do some signing up for things, and meeting people there was very helpful. And I got a few of these resource guides, and I met homeless people who had no clue what to do first, where to go. They didn't know about the drop-in center. They didn't know about the living room. They didn't know about the, open table. They didn't know about any of those things. And for the 2 years that I lived in my car, in safe parking, and I was so glad to find out about that. I didn't know there was such a thing. I would give these things out to people, and those people would say, "Oh, I didn't even know that they had such a thing." And I go, "I hear you, because that's the same experience I had. I didn't know there was information about healthcare and legal services and senior services and veteran services. I didn't know that there were such things, so I didn't know the right questions to ask." So a guide like this is very helpful. And when I called 211, they didn't have all of this information. So something like this guide would be very helpful. And once you find one resource, it usually leads you to 3 or 4 more resources, which leads you to more. So it's, it grows exponentially. So I was really happy to find that. And I do wish that they had more of these. And for a while, it was an online kind of thing.
Mhm.
And finding out that I could go to Whole Foods, for instance, if the library was closed and I couldn't get online. Little things like that, like negotiating the system and finding out, what shelters there are and why they would or wouldn't work for me. And I never went to a shelter because I have allergies. I have terrible allergies. So I thought, it's better for me to sleep in my car. And I felt safe in safe parking at the administration parking lot. And then when that closed, I went over to Dave Berto's lot that he had. And you make friends with people, and you get a community, a sense of, belonging. And that was very helpful to me. And then eventually I gave a lady that I met in Whole Foods a ride to the living room. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And so then I started going there in the daytime, and there was more help. And so resources and making people available to answer questions is very, very helpful in my experience. So I would encourage whoever has the time and the resources and whatever it takes to make more guides like this that you can physically hand out to people who might not have access to the internet, would be very helpful. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. And that's a great point. Those guides went out of publication a few years back. It's probably pre-COVID, but it's something we've certainly thought about trying to restart again. I can put in the chat at some point, or the Q&A, the link to kind of the online link right now that I use, right, when people ask me for help, that has places to go get access for coordinated entry, which is the system to get assessed for housing, for lack of a better word, as well as a shelter listing and other things like that.
And 211 has been reamped with a new director. So I've tried it in the past before, and just like recently it's gotten a lot better, and it's more up to date. Before it was like behind, it couldn't keep up with how fast things were moving and how dynamic they were. And networking for sure, like you said, meeting one person leads to, one thing leads to another, and that by far is the best way to network and get resources. However, there's a lot of our unhoused that aren't really comfortable in that social setting, so that puts a barrier on that. And those paper resources were good, but there continuously seems to be like something new. Like, I haven't heard. I still say that all the time. I haven't heard about that. I had no idea. I should. There's just so much help out there, and to get it streamlined into one spot would be a miracle.
Thanks, Chessy. Are there other questions and comments from folks? All right, I do see a hand. That's Saves Administrator. I think that's Adrian. You're unmuted.
Thank you. So this is something I hear a fair amount from people who say, you know, I'm not at the top of anybody's list. I don't have children. I'm not physically disabled. I don't use substances. I'm never going to get a house because there's not enough apartments to go around, and they're prioritized for people who need them the most. And some people feel bitter about that, like, hey, I'm taking care of my health. This person isn't taking care of their health, and they're going to get housed. I just wonder if you all at the LEAP board have talked about this, if you think this is a problem, or is this, just what do you think about it?
I can answer that. So far with the LEAP board, we've mainly been focused on giving feedback to agencies that come into our board and ask for our opinion. Also, on strategic planning and the various subcommittees of the CoC. I think moving forward, we will be able to focus on more of that broader aspect and those details, the bigger numbers of people that are out there. And I think that historically, yes, the people who seem to, you know, be in the most distress have gotten the most help the fastest. But I do hear that a lot as well. In the line of work that I'm doing now, is that there's so many people who are very well capable of taking care of themselves and supporting their own housing. We just don't have enough affordable housing here in Sonoma County that's available for people. So not sure what we can do, but we can continue to advocate and continue to carry that echo. That's what the LEAP board is here for, is to take those voices and to echo them so that it can be heard and done something about.
Chessy, did you want to add something, or you're on mute?
Sorry about that. I agree with what Rebekah said, you know, bringing the knowledge of those challenges forth and addressing them and identifying that needs improvement. And yes, it does seem like, or it is, that the more vulnerable get housed first, because they're more vulnerable. But that doesn't mean that, you know, the no man's land in the middle, where they're healthy enough to be able to survive, so to speak, being homeless. Maybe it's about, you know, shifting the balance over and arming them with resources that, you know, they're capable of using to get them to that next level, and addressing those issues and just bringing awareness. But it does seem like that, unfortunately, there's just so many unhoused in our community. It has to go, you know, by that vulnerability. But I do believe that isn't coordinated entry, we're reamping it, and there is going to be a new way of triaging people that may or may not affect that. I'm not sure how that will turn out.
Yeah, that's going to be with coordinated entry. We are going to be, and by we, I mean the system of care. So that there's a whole working group going on with that, but that's going to be probably an 8 to 12 month process over the next year to revamp what's called the assessment tool. And that's already started, but there'll be a you know, work done on, you know, figuring out like how it should be adjusted, and then it'll have to be tested out, you know, actually live in the field to make sure it actually works. And a big part of that is addressing it to ensure that it's not there's no inequities around race and ethnicity, and especially in gender. That's a big concern. We want to make sure that the tool is not screening people out, you know, even inadvertently because of that. So
Adrian, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, since Michael brought up the question of race, let me ask Rebekah and Chessy, how does race figure into all of this? What do you see? What do people say to you? You know we live in a racist society, unconscious or not. So I'd just like to hear your experiences with that and what you think, some of the things we could do to make a difference on it.
For me, just being in outreach and seeing, firsthand with the encampments, it seems that the minorities are underserved by far. And comparing groups, when we go into the majority is Hispanic or African American or Native American, the numbers of individuals that are in coordinated entries seem a lot lower than when we go to an encampment or encounter people that are Caucasian. So I see that, on our end of just when we're entering people in, that they don't have the services offered as much. And there's also, sometimes there's an uncomfortableness of finding like a safe place to go to get those services where they feel comfortable, and that their language is spoke, etc.
Mhm.
Chessy.
Not really sure what you mean by what we can do, if you mean like neighbor, like a community, or you mean providers or the system of care. I know that the system of care is integrating a lot of demographic points and trying to, we have the tribal seat that's coming onto the CoC, but on the boots on the ground and in our community, I would say respecting the different cultures is super important. Having things printed in multiple languages is one thing. But like the Latino villages is great because that would give people that identify with that culture a place that's familiar. And I think we could definitely use more of those. I mean, we have a lot of different cultures in Sonoma County. It's not just Spanish and American. We do have a lot of diversity. So, but the numbers that are actually in-housed, I don't know the demographics around the different cultures. I hope that helps, Adrian.
No, thank you. That was good. You made some good points.
I think
Adrian.
too, just to add really quick onto that, having a place like, so the living room, etc., that was just for someone of ethnic background would be amazing. And I know that we've been trying to find land to have one, but that has been something that has been brought up out in outreach too.
All right, and we have another hand. Next we have Monica. You're unmuted.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Thanks, Chessy and Rebekah. So much great wisdom and experience coming today. I just wanted to share one of my pet peeves because I heard it mentioned a little bit, and Michael asked a little bit about challenges and what's helped, and then I heard Rebekah talk about her story about mom having the car impounded, and this is one of my huge pet peeves. Is we have so many individuals and families who are struggling and doing the best they can, and their car is impounded. And if we could find a way to work with the local police and authorities, because this isn't a car being impounded, this is a home, this is a house, this is, I've had people lose, the last thing their mother gave them before they passed away. And it's not just driver's license, you get it, social security cards, the ID, because then they're not just back at point one to get housed, right? They've got to go back 6 more steps to figure that out. So, I think big push for the early part of 2024 is I'd really like to see if we can find a collaboration of folks to kind of work on what can we do to stop the impounding of homes, as I call them, these vehicles that are pushing people further back. So I don't have answers to that. I just wanted to put that out here, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Monica.
It's so true too, when you have that protection of a vehicle around you and then that vehicle is taken away, the vulnerability, it's a whole new level of survival. And what a great point. And yes, we'll be raising the voices for that. That is something that is needed and has been needed for a long time. And it does happen to a lot of unhoused folks.
One of the topics in the lead board has actually been that we haven't been able to fully flush it out, but we've talked about possibly having proposing that we develop like a permit program to where if somebody is living in their vehicle, maybe they should have a permit for their vehicle, despite not having it all the way up to date or registered or whatnot, that they have some protection. So
Yeah.
it's definitely on our radar. It is on our long list of things to bring out to the community.
All right, I want to raise it up in January and be part of that collaborative team, and maybe start talking to some local officials and see what we can come up with. Maybe we start in Santa Rosa and it'll spread, or what we can do. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
All right, we have another hand. Davis, you're unmuted.
Well, thank you. That one of the comments just reminded me of a situation that I encountered as a volunteer mediator at the Superior Court. Involved a man living in his motorhome, and he was in the process of getting it registered, but it didn't pass the smog, so he was kind of in the middle of it. And the police took him out of the motorhome and had the vehicle towed and just put him out on the street. They just said, take what you want, because we're going to tow your vehicle. It just struck me so counter to what we're trying to accomplish. So the question is, the homeless division, maybe they can try to speak with the police department to give these people a warning. This gentleman he had received help. It was just heartbreaking, really. And he was suing the city. And he had already, just by taking the vehicle away, it was now going to cost him $6,000 to retrieve it with the towing fees. It was just heartbreaking. So I don't know, just something to think about. The police, of all people, should not be putting people out of the little home that they've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Davis.
And I think that there's some programs that are starting to incorporate that. Like, for instance, Sonoma Works. If you sign up for Sonoma Works, they have a homeless pilot program, and they have like a one-time only of fixing or registering your car, like to a maximum. I'm not sure how much it is. I believe that there's one or two other programs out there. And then St. Vincent de Paul used to have like a DMV. They used to have a whole vehicle program. I don't know if it's still going on. I was just trying to look it up really quick. I think yeah. So it's coming.
I was just wondering if I was still muted. Well, believe it or not, this gentleman had availed himself of that. That's how he got the help to get it registered. But when he got it registered, he had to pass the smog. So the police said, yeah, well, it's still not registered. It was just the discretion of the police. It should have been different in my mind. They should have said, we'll give you 10 days if we see you again not registered, something, without literally just taking him out of his motorhome right there on the spot. So thank you again.
Thanks, Davis.
I think I saw Alice's
Yeah,
hand
I
up.
did have Alice, did you want to speak, or? I'm not seeing the hand anymore. Oh, Rebekah, she's so cute. Does anybody have a question or a comment? All right, we do have a hand. Pat, you're unmuted.
I have a question for the last person who spoke concerning the registration of the RV. Do we know if the fees were paid for the registration?
The person who spoke isn't on the panel.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a problem getting my vehicle smogged this year. I reached out to a local politician who was willing to assist me with getting it smogged. One thing that I was told was that I needed to have my registration paid for. And then they can give you time to get if there is a problem with the vehicle getting smogged, you can, if your fees are paid, if there's an extension, you can get an extension from the DMV. And so my questions have to do with, did any of that happen? And we don't know.
We don't. Thank you.
And
Thank you
maybe,
for that information though, Pat.
Maybe Davis, you could put that in the chat, the Q&A. And then we'll move on to Alice.
All right, Alice, you are unmuted.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first I wanted to thank all of you for having this panel. This is a great idea to have people be able to hear from Rebekah and Chessy. And I really want to thank Rebekah and Chessy for being willing to do this, because this is such a personal matter and it takes a lot of courage and commitment to be willing to share your story. So thank you. And in response to several questions that have been posed so far, and I'd like to hear from any of you on the panel about this, it seems to me, I'm just passionate about seeing us create as much interim housing, non-congregate, pallet shelters or tiny home villages, and prioritizing that over permanent housing until we have everyone sheltered, because it's so tempting to want to spend that money on permanent housing because it's permanent. But every person who's unhoused is in a terrible situation and they desperately need to be taken care of right now, today. They need a roof over their head and a locked door. And until they have that, it's really hard to move forward or maintain their health and so forth. So I just really want to advocate for that a shelter first priority so that everyone has a safe place to stay. And I welcome your thoughts. Thanks.
Do any of our panelists have any?
I don't have too much to say other than I agree. Absolutely. You know, anywhere we can get people sheltered.
Great. Alice, did you have any other questions or comments?
I might, maybe I'll raise my hand again if that's okay. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, we have time for a few more questions.
Go ahead and raise your virtual hand if you have a question or a comment, and I can unmute you. And if you're calling in, press *9. We do have a hand. Adrian, you're unmuted.
Thanks. I don't mean to clog up the whole time. If someone else wants to speak, please put them on first. But I wanted to sort of echo Alice about how hard it can be to talk about this kind of thing. There's so much stigma and stereotypes about people who are homeless. And I would like you both to tell us a little bit of what that has been like for you, or maybe and how you got to the place where you're self-confident and able to just speak with us like this. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, is not falling into despair and shame.
That is a great question. And I don't think, for me personally, I knew when that line kind of got crossed from me being like shameful, thinking I did something wrong. I think just the process of it and the people around me, and then coming out housed and advocating and looking back and just remembering the frustration that, like, I could be happy, just trying to get ready for the day and to go out there and smash some goals, and not looking my best, and having somebody, not open the door for you into, an establishment, and then, the next day you look completely different and the door gets open for you, and just thinking like, wow, like I'm the same person. You just thought I was homeless at one point, and now I don't look homeless, at the other point. And I think that gave me confidence to just be able to shed light on that, of you never know, you never know somebody's story until you've heard their story, and validating that, and it feels good to be able to, like, bring awareness to the unhoused, because their stories, you when you're unhoused, you are like, it's like a predator and prey, and you feel like you're prey, but you will make yourself look like you're still a predator. Everything's okay, I don't need help, you want to maintain that, because that's ingrained in society. So asking for help, and getting to the point where you can be vulnerable, and then moving forward from that, I think gave me confidence into where I am today.
Thank you. That was
Go ahead, Adrian.
no, I don't know if you missed my question, but I was basically saying, hey, there's a lot of stereotype and shame. How is it you are so poised and self-confident and wonderful?
Thank you. I gathered that kind of from Chessy. I was handing off the baby when you were asking your question. I think for me, because I was homeless at 9 years old, living in a hotel, it's a little different for me. I didn't become homeless as an adult in the beginning, so it was just kind of a way of life for me. And I met so many people sitting at the transit mall, who, were in a lot of different situations. So I actually mainly focused on showing people where the services were when I was about 12 years old. So I guess I didn't really feel that shame. And so it's always been a part of my life, trying to make sure that people are taken care of. I just always cared, and cared to make sure that we had the services. And I mean, I know it's tough, and I think that probably one of the toughest things right now is when I do engage with people. And this happened even after I had been housed, like the first time when I was like in my early 20s, and I would go back down to places like Doyle Park and the Transit Mall, and just looking for familiar faces and checking on people. And there was new groups of people who were homeless or hanging out, and they treated me like I was a yuppie, or that I was never homeless. They just thought maybe I was there for charity and just trying to help people, but I had never been homeless before. And it was really interesting to be treated that way, that the people that I knew for a long time, they knew who I was, and they were proud of me. They were like, wow, you're doing great, and I'm like, hey, you can do great too, just follow these steps. And so I have actually the opposite problem, where people, don't know that I came from there. So I think they didn't trust me as much. So it's super important to have that lived experience and to have that peer support going back, and everybody just kind of reaching back to each other and helping bring us up, because when somebody comes down that you don't know, or I mean, it's always nice when there's like a politician supporting a cause, but it's just feels a little different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
to piggyback off of that really quick too, it's kind of off topic, but having helping people that are unhoused, when they find out that your lived experience, it's a whole new dimension and a whole new trust, like someone who wouldn't be willing to engage in services or listen. You find that when you've tell them that you walk the same road, it's amazing. Like that, it's a strength for sure in helping the unhoused having lived experience.
And it really is different for a girl of my complexion going through services than other people who look different and who talk different. I have heard plenty of stories where they were discriminated against, and sucks. I'm not sure how to fix that one, but definitely I see it, and I try to help.
Thank you. We do have one more question. We have about 4 minutes left.
We'll take the last one.
Yes, Alice, you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you very much. So a couple of things I'd like to put in a word for. Bend Dennis Posake's ear, perhaps, or others here, is two things. The first is that I couldn't understand when I started going into homeless shelters why there were no desks for us to get our work done. And just to find a job is a full-time desk job, needing to talk on the phone and be at the computer and fill out paperwork and keep all of one's files handy and safe and secure, and not have to pack up everything way one does if going to the library for a couple hours in the morning, then having to pack up to leave to go to lunch somewhere and come back. And there really should be a desk wherever there's a bed, so that people can get that full-time desk work done of getting out of homelessness. It's sort of as if a lot of people think that people can just levitate out of homelessness without doing all that desk work. And so I just want to advocate for that. And the other is, I would really like to see our system of care be something that people can connect with 6 or 12 months before they become homeless, when they're at risk of having difficulty paying their rent, and being assigned a caseworker then who will walk them through the steps to hopefully prevent homelessness, but also be their one touch point throughout their entire time of homelessness until they get housed, so that they always know what the resources are and what steps they should be taking next, and keep going. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Alice.
Want to comment on Alice's comments, or?
I can. Another one of my grand ideas is to just have another bigger drop-in center, but I'm talking about like a cafe, a cafeteria where people can sit down, little pods where they can just take a nap, not necessarily emergency shelter, but come take a nap, wash your clothes. I know we do have the drop-in at Caritas, but I'm not sure what that looks like these days. But also where there can be community, right? So not just a drop-in center for homeless people only, but I mean, like, I don't know, like a big gym or something, but that has all of these things, just a resource center. You know, loneliness and isolation is also a problem. And, you know, people can congregate and make connections and talk to each other and eat food and also have, you know, a big office space. Why not?
Thanks, Rebekah.
Thanks. All right. Well, I
Time.
know we're right at time. I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you, Chessy and Rebekah. I know you both have inspired me for a long time, so I just want to say a huge thanks. This is wonderful. And yeah, I've learned a lot. So just huge gratitude to both of you, and for also all of the folks here in the public who have attended and asked just wonderful questions. And please do feel free to reach out to me or Aaliyah or Andrew. I think our emails are pretty easy to come by, and we hope to do this again. And it might be January. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we're skipping December, and we will start again in January.
We'll start again in January with a new topic. So
yeah, thank you all for sharing your wisdom. Very much appreciated. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
you all.
Great.